Hi, everyone. My name is Marlene, and welcome to another episode of Python on Azure with Marlene and Gwen. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, Guido. Um, we probably a lot of you that are watching this might know who Guido is. He is actually the creator of Python, so a pretty big deal. I have seen Guido a couple of times at PyCon. This year, I saw him in Pennsylvania, and that was very cool. But Guido, for people who don't know you, how do you like to introduce yourself these days? I feel like you've been the creator of Python for a while, but like if someone was just meeting you today, how would you introduce yourself?
Oh, they would have to already know that I'm the creator of Python. They wouldn't
Yeah.
get that out of me. I I just say hi. Often it never comes up. And
Mm.
and when it does, I say, "Okay, well, you got me."
Yeah.
I
That's
I I appreciate that intro. We were reflecting on this, Marley and I, earlier as we were preparing, and it's kind of a wild thing that we are all colleagues at Microsoft. Like but I'm certain that our day to days look quite different. So I'm curious to like, what have you been up to at your time at Microsoft as of recent?
Well, I work from home full time. Well, I actually work part time. On the days that I feel I work for Microsoft, uh, I get up when I want. I walk up to my computer and I start reading email, and I keep doing that until the first meeting starts. And sometimes I'm lucky and I have half a day left for coding, and that's what makes me happy. I get my endorphins from coding.
Awesome. And As are you open to chatting about TypeAgent just out of
Sure.
nothing technical, just we're curious at a couple of things there. So,
yeah.
speaking about work, kind of Microsoft related, you have TypeAgent now, well, the Python port specifically that you're working on, and I'm sure you could pick anything you wanted to work on. What is it about this project that made you say, "I wanna work on this"?
Honestly, it had a lot to do with the people. Until recently, well, the sort of let's forget what happened in the last month. But a year ago, I met Steve Luco. I had actually met him a few times before. He chatted with me a number of times. I forget exactly how often, but a couple times while he was, I think, at some point not at Microsoft. But he was an expert in optimizing language interpreters because he was the sort of one of the leading lights behind the JavaScript virtual machine that was originally built into Edge.
Okay, wow.
I think it's called Chakra. And so he had some very good advice for me when I started a project to do a similar thing to Python. When I was looking for a place to sort of do a new project after having done faster C Python for almost 4 years, he popped up on my radar as someone who was working on an interesting project in that area. And I had an opportunity to meet with him while I was in Redmond for an unrelated activity. And he showed me a bunch of demos, and he and his partner in crime, Umesh Madan, uh, sort of convinced me that I should join their team.
Mm.
And I've been very happy on that team, learning lots of stuff, including I had to learn TypeScript.
Oh
Fine.
no.
That that was their favorite language.
That's super interesting, Guido. Actually, right now, I'm not sure if you've seen, there's been a big debate recently about TypeScript versus Python, and people are arguing right now over which is the language that's going to become the language of AI over time. I personally think it's already Python. I don't think that's gonna change. I'm not like I don't see it changing. But
Is
What's your
that about the numbers that GitHub
yeah,
discovered where like a majority of new repos that were AI related were using TypeScript?
yeah.
Yeah, I they asked me the same question. My reaction then and now is I would like to do a much deeper analysis of what types of code is in those repos.
Yeah.
I have a hunch, but I have absolutely done zero research. Part of it is that everybody loves a good web UI,
Mhm.
and it's really easy with to get an LLM to generate static code for a web UI.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody who has done that experiment immediately wants to save that for posterity or at least add it to their own portfolio,
Yeah.
even though they didn't write the code. But that's total speculation. It could be that people are doing serious server-side TypeScript using Node,
I don't think so.
and Python is
I
the
don't think so.
but I have a feeling that Python still has some advantages, like being able to work efficiently with large multidimensional arrays of floating point numbers, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah,
which is such a built-in operation in Python. Well, it's not technically built-in, but it's like a very important third-party set of modules, really, packages in the ecosystem that everybody relies on.
absolutely.
As far as I know, JavaScript and TypeScript have no equivalent. It would take them years to build an equivalent thing, honestly, because that's not you have a clean spec of what it should do, and now you just start writing code, and maybe an LLM can help you with that. No, it's more you have to build a community and a consensus and sort of go through many iterations of the APIs and find performance issues that come from actual use cases rather than from what you think will be slow because that's all those two never match. And so I think for many things Python still has a big advantage. I was speaking to a coworker and I said, "Oh yeah, and now we're checking that we're not sending too much data to the embedding service by using the tick token library to count
Mm.
tokens." And he said, "Oh, I wish I could use that in TypeScript."
Yeah,
You don't have that. That library doesn't exist in
that
Type.
library doesn't exist. Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think Python's biggest strength is its ecosystem. That's
Mhm.
100% what I think.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you as well about the report because if people actually dug into the numbers, they would see that most of the AI, the actual code for the workloads is in Python, and that number grew a lot this year. And if you then they also have some numbers about what the JavaScript and TypeScript is being used for. It's mainly dashboards and demos and things like that. Very lightweight things. And 100%, I just don't think I just personally don't think Types I don't know, I don't think they have the ecosystem for it. But they're very loud on X right now. They're
Well,
opinionated and
yeah, I mean, if you have some data, even if you don't know where it comes from, that suggests that you are now more popular than the well-known, most popular language around, then of course you gotta sort of take that PR hook. I would do the same. I mean, I honestly don't care how popular Python is, but I was pleasantly surprised and very proud when I found out a few years ago that on various popularity measures, Python is number one by a growing margin, in fact. But
Yeah.
popularity is not the same as use. So it
Mm,
could be that more people like Python, but are forced to write code in C++ or TypeScript or JavaScript or Java or
right.
C Sharp, of course. And they still like Python better, but they don't write any Python code or hardly any.
Yeah. Um, I think kind of going along that line, something else that I wanted to ask you is about is about types themselves. And how closely do you think, how important do you think that is in terms of Python continuing on as being as popular as it is, or maybe like the use of Python? Do you think types are as important as people say? A lot of people have been saying that they think that ultimately the main thing that's not good in Python is the types. And would you change that? Do you think it's fine as it is with no types in?
Ah, well, so the actual story is more complicated because we have optional static typing, which is supported by a number of different third-party products that are called type checkers. The initial one that I also helped create, well, I didn't create it, but I worked on it for a few years while I was at Dropbox. MyPy is still the thought leader in that field, although there are now two different type checkers being written in Rust, one by a small company named Astro and one by Facebook. And they couldn't agree on what they wanted their TypeScript checker to do. So even though they were well aware of each other's project, they decided not to merge or collaborate, but go their different ways. And I can see how Facebook has a very different idea for what they want to do with the type checker. There's also Pyright, which came out of Microsoft. There's probably one or two that I'm forgetting. Yeah, Facebook had an older one called Pyre, which I always thought was kind of an offensive name because it was like it felt like the fire in which they were trying to burn my pie.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm sure that wasn't exactly what they meant, but they also didn't object against that.
Did you say no?
And I felt very vindicated when Pyre basically was canceled because it
Yes.
was not there. It was not very popular, and apparently it was also not fast in the way they needed it to be fast. So that's why they're now
Right.
building their Rust-based version, which is called Firefly, which I can stand behind. So anyway, the static type checkers work roughly in the same way as TypeScript works for JavaScript. The big difference is that if you take code with annotations and you just run it through Python, you run it with Python, just the Python interpreter. The Python interpreter ignores the type annotations. It
Mm.
never checks them. It doesn't do anything with them. It does make them runtime introspectable. So you can ask, hey, what is the type of the second argument of this function? Things like that. Or what is the return type of this function? There have been some great projects that sort of took that functionality of Python's static typing or type annotations, also known as type hints, and built big, interesting, and now important runtime facilities on top of that. Biggest ones, I think, are Fast API
Yep.
and perhaps more fundamentally, Pydantic.
Pedantic. Right. Exactly.
And so those sort of, because those are so successful and popular, we now have an additional constraint on future evolution of Python's static type system, because we want to make sure that any new feature of the type system is still introspectable by those tools. There shouldn't be blind spots where, say, Pydantic cannot tell what a particular function annotation was because it uses a novel feature. But that's an additional design constraint.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you want to know if your code is actually type safe, you have to run it separately through one of the type checkers. I currently use Pyright because that one's built into VS Code anyway, or at least into the Python extension. And so I've also what you normally do, projects of any size, you integrate the type check in your CI. So whenever someone pushes a change or merges a change, you always first check to make sure that it actually passes the full type check.
Yeah.
And there are holes in that. But there are always, all type systems have holes.
Yeah.
In TypeScript, you can also say, we don't know about the type of this argument and we don't care. And Python has basically the same mechanism. So the type systems of Python and TypeScript are pretty similar. You can have untyped code, you can have statically typed code, you can have a mix. That's why it's called gradual typing. Yeah, I'm probably already being way too technical. And I try to be humble about it, but
Yeah.
it sort of initiate this development, and I had to argue long and hard with many core devs who didn't think that static typing was at all a desirable feature for Python.
Oh, wow.
And most of them have since learned that actually it is very useful.
Yeah.
Because for large projects, like if you have something of 1,000 lines, 5,000 lines of code, well, you can lose your way in that too, but you don't really need the static type checking that much. When
Yeah.
you start getting to 10,000 and more, if you don't have type checking, you better start working on adding them right now, because by the time you reach 50,000 or 100,000 lines, you absolutely need the type checks to sort of keep your head clear. Be able to, the static type checks are also very useful. The type annotations are useful for humans navigating the code base, because you look at a function and you see the type annotation that says this is either a string or an int, but nothing else. And that is super helpful when you read the code that is then checking, is it a string or is it an int maybe, or doing something that you can do with both with strings and ints, like multiplication. And that helps you read the code. And if you don't have that, sometimes puzzling out in your head whether this always returns a list of lists of strings, or whether it can sometimes return something else, or whether it maybe also can return none, can be increasingly complicated. And just seeing it written there in front of you, and usually, well, you could write type annotations and never run a type checker, and the annotations would be all wrong. That's what you get if you put comments in instead. As long as you what you have can be expressed in Python's type system, the static type system, then it will be checked. And so as long as you have your type checker in your CI or built in your editor, like VS Code, it's
Yeah.
just if you read underlines as well, you have to turn on at least basic type checking. I think by default type checking is off for some reason. I think that default made sense 5 years ago, but not now.
So sort of around this topic, you had once in a previous interview mentioned that, creating software is a social activity. Like you have an audience of two, you
I
have
strongly
other
believe that.
yeah, you have
Yeah.
the audience of other developers who would work on the code base, and then computers. But do you think now with like all these AI programming tools that to some extent now we're also including them in that audience, or do you still think it's the same?
Well, the AI also benefits from seeing the type annotations, honestly,
Yeah.
with it. And if at least if you ask nicely, the AI will put type annotations in the code it generates for you. Well, you can probably also ask rudely, actually, because it doesn't care. But I like to ask nicely anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that I'm afraid of the revenge of future super AI,
Super AI.
Yeah.
particularly vengeful. There are some people who are very worried about vengeful AIs in the future. I don't see that. Much more likely is vengeful humans misusing, abusing AI.
Agreed. Agreed. I was on the TypeAgent repo earlier today, and I saw you had some PRs that you were assigning to Copilot, or at least mentioning Copilot there. Curious what
I
your
happen Yeah, today
yeah
I experimented. I think I've only done 2 experiments with
yeah
that so
how'd it
far.
go? Yeah.
Yeah.
The first one, it couldn't grok it. It got stuck. It started doing really bad things, like I told it, "Write some unit tests for this." It wrote a bunch of test functions that tested exactly 0 of the new functions and classes it had created. I mean, it was close because it tested some mathematical properties of values that were computed as part of the computation, but it wasn't actually testing that the computation was doing it right. It was just testing that if you copied that computation into a separate function, that the computation had the right answer. And you don't need a unit test for that. And it sort of it didn't, so it was bizarre. I wrote, "You made a fool of yourself,"
No.
but it, I don't know. Maybe it was offended, but
A vengeful AI is gonna come one day.
it's gonna come from me. I know.
Gonna come for you.
Yeah, but so anyway, that one, all my attempts to make it sort of correct the mistakes were going too slow, and maybe I didn't quite understand the Copilot interface that well either. I was in the beginning, I was really struggling with how to get the Copilot to do anything, and eventually I figured out you have to assign the issue to the Copilot, and then it will write a PR. If you add comments, the Copilot doesn't care. You can review all you want, but unless in your review you say at Copilot, this is wrong.
Right. It won't.
It,
Yeah.
it doesn't see
Doesn't
it
know you're talking to.
because
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's only seeing the things that
Mhm.
that say at Copilot, and then you can instruct it to look at other things.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had to finish the job with an AI feature that I'm more familiar with and that I've used hundreds of times over the past half year or so, which is agent mode in VS Code.
Right. Exactly.
Too bad for ChatGPT and Microsoft. The best coding assist agent is still Claude Sonnet 4.5.
I was about to ask you what's your
Yeah.
model
Your
preference?
model of choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's that one. Like everyone else who generates code.
Do you find that agent mode with that model does get the work done as you expect it to?
It is fantastic.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is, unlike the Copilot on the GitHub website,
Mhm.
on the GitHub website, it sort of it thinks a bunch. You have no idea what it's thinking about. Then it writes a bunch of code. Who knows how many attempts it has made and writing that code. And then it writes a summary of what it thinks it has done, which is, I think, mostly accurate, but I don't necessarily trust that. So I read every line of code it generated.
Yeah.
But if you use agent mode, it's very chatty. You have that
Yeah.
side column where it's talking to itself, or maybe it's talking to me, but I can't read everything, but it's sort of, you get a complete insight in how it's reasoning, how it sort of finds out that it wrote some bad code. Like it at some point it will run a type checker, and then, or at least in my workflow, I've taught it that it has to run the type checker, and then you see it sort of backtrack. It just mumbles to itself, "Oh, I see the mistake that I made," or it sees where it has sort of forgotten to patch up things, like it changed the function, but it didn't. It forgot to change the color in a very different file or something.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so that gives me much more confidence that it's doing the right thing. And still, I review most of the code it generates because it has blind spots in things like design, API design, and architecture. So if I give it a problem that can be solved by, say, adding a new function or changing an existing function,
Mm.
everything is hunky dory. If I give it a not fully specified problem where one of the steps of the solution is change a certain API or change in architecture. Maybe we need to have a class where we used to have a function, or maybe we need to have two functions instead of one, or we need to have to pass other things into a function so it has all the context that it needs. Once I caught it actually trying to use code introspection, which is possible quite deeply in Python, but was totally the wrong tool for what I'm trying to do. I think it was reading the source code of a particular function to figure out whether it was this or that. The solution was just like, oh, change the API. So we tell it what that function is.
Are you pretty much all in AI with the work that you're doing, or do you find any specific tasks that you're turning it off
I think
or
it's still half
disabling?
and half. I still like to write code myself. I'm definitely not in the vibe coding camp. Uh,
Really?
I may be, I mean, I'm getting the AI to do significant work in my code base, but it's still my code base. And I
Mm,
feel I stand behind that code base to humans who are using it.
Yeah.
And the code, I also, the code base is open source now. I want human maintainers to be able to understand it and write their own improvements and contribute those back without being confronted with a lot of AI slop that happens to do the right thing, but you wouldn't want to know how it
Yeah.
does
How
it.
it does that. That's very interesting because I was at a DjangoCon and some maintainers were talking about how they're very anti vibe coding because of the PRs people are generating that have a lot of, maybe security issues or it's like really badly written and it's just
That's a specific problem that big popular open source projects
yeah.
encounter a lot, and they're all struggling with it. Though they're sort of there's more evidence of what patterns those users use and how to quickly recognize them. And we have human moderators who just quickly say, "Oh, this is not how we do things. You clearly didn't review the code that the AI gave you. Close the PR."
Yeah.
But yeah, we see a fair number of PRs that have code that doesn't make sense. Maybe it works, but it's not Pythonic code. Either the style
Mhm.
is all wrong, or it's overly elaborate, or it's just pointless or pointlessly complicated. And those things, especially if they're not marked as I use ChatGPT to write this PR
perfect.
or something like
Yeah.
that. Because often these people are actually being dishonest.
Mm.
What they want is not for Python to be better. What they want is to be able to point to a future employer. I contributed to the Python
Recognition.
program. I have a
Yeah.
commit into
Mhm.
Python.
Yeah.
And it used to
Exactly.
be that those people would mostly go for typo hunting, fixing spelling mistakes in the
The
documentation was
documentation.
our hobby.
Yeah.
And we never encouraged that, but we also didn't outright sort of reject that. Although I,
Yeah.
I personally refuse to review PRs like that mostly. And it often those like if you have one PR that fixes the same three types of typos in 50 files, that's just a lot of noise. And it's not like any of those typos
Help.
confuse the readers.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, I would much rather have a PR that fixes one typo that actually does make a difference because there was a word not missing. And so now the documentation says the opposite of what it meant to say, or
Mhm.
things like that.
Yeah.
Uh, I like I like those concepts. That means that someone actually tried to understand it
Mm.
and found that it was incomprehensible and figured out why and fixed it.
Right.
That's what I want. The people who just run a spell checker over a bunch of files send the result as a PR. Well, we can if we wanted all the typos fixed, we could do that ourselves. We could run that tool once over all our files and
Mhm.
bam.
100%. I'm gonna shift gears a little bit and kind of ask you, so something that I would say is a growing maybe trend these days is, influencing is becoming very popular, and I think a lot of young people may be watching or just in general in society, a lot of them are being told to, quit their job or quit school and join YC and become an entrepreneur or whatever it is to like just be their own employer or something like that. And I'm interested to know your journey here because you've created Python, which is amazing. Um, why didn't you go down the entrepreneurial route? Would you and today, knowing what you do today, would you have started a company? I know a lot of the open source projects these days have people who, created a company out of it or something. How do you feel about that versus working at Microsoft, for example?
I have never been ambitious in my life.
You've never been ambitious?
It all just happened. I swear. I mean,
Oh
I I designed Python mostly for my own personal use.
Yeah.
I made it exactly so that it was optimal for me, and
wow.
I showed it to coworkers, and they all said, "Oh, that's great," and started sort of giving me suggestions or asking for features or reporting bugs just by walking up a few doors along the
Yeah.
hallway and telling me about it. I enjoyed that process. So
Yeah.
after about a year, two coworkers and myself decided, and I was not the first one to come up with this thought, but they said, "We this is so much fun. This is a great thing you made. We should share that with." Well, at the time, it wasn't even the internet; it was Usenet. So we posted the whole source code on Usenet. I did one thing right. I went to my management and I said, "Hey, I'm gonna post this thing as open source." Except the word open source was also not invented, but I used one of the now venerable open source licenses, the MIT license,
Yeah,
which I was
wow.
familiar with because a very early big open source project, the X Windows server, they were using it because X was a collaboration between several competing computer manufacturers. I used it because it looked like it looked official and it was totally toothless and harmless. And management, I think within 2 days, came back to me and say, "Sure, that's fine." I had expected that I would have to put up a fight, and I don't know how I would have done in that fight, but they were okay with it. I
Yeah,
think they
wow.
didn't see the value at the time. They thought, "Oh, this is just some random hobby project of Guido. We like Guido, we like to keep him happy
Yeah.
because he's a good coder." I thoroughly enjoyed what happened after that, but I was never pushing it. I wasn't telling people, "Oh, use Python." I wasn't going around giving talks about Python. There was no Twitter or anything
Yeah.
to post about it. I had just made a minimal announcement somewhere on Usenet where other language nerds could find it. And it arrived at the right time and it had the right sort of shape that people liked using it.
Yeah.
I was surprised when Tim O'Reilly told me how many Python books he was selling, which is a lower bound for how many serious Python users there
Yeah.
are.
Yeah, 100%.
At some point, there were 80 different web frameworks for written in Python.
Oh, yeah.
When the web was new
Mhm.
and sort of everybody wrote their own web framework once they had learned how HTTP and HTML actually worked
Yeah.
and how terrible it was if you had to use them raw.
Yeah.
Uh, that sort of that eventually was narrowed down to we have Django and Flask and now a few successors of Flask. The Flask architecture style is prevalent now, but Django is also still a really strong open source project, also its own community, as you must have noticed when you were at that conference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Starting in the late 90s,
Mhm.
a few people who were into scientific data processing started adding extensions to Python. And so Python has a good mechanism for writing extensions in another language like C or C++. People started writing extensions that allowed Python to efficiently manipulate large arrays of numbers, multidimensional. I forget what the first one was called. The second one was called Numeric Python. Became very successful for 5 or 10 years. Then it sort of grew old, and the original maintainer had long moved on, and it was reinvented under the name NumPy. Now there's NumPy, which underlies an enormous amount of code. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm using it myself in my AI project. There are a few other libraries that have a similar, very similar abstraction built into them, also implemented in C with sort of different purposes or different emphasis on certain features than the original NumPy. That made it logical to use Python first for scientific data processing, because that is like various bits of linear algebra, also plotting, of course.
Yeah.
So that's where you got matplotlib. Then data science, which is handling at least columns that were homogeneous and rows that were different, because you could, of course, in a row of a spreadsheet or pandas data, I forget what they're called.
Data frames.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Data
Yeah.
frame.
you can tell that I'm not a common user of pandas myself,
That's totally fine.
but I have played with it, and it's
Yeah.
a great tool. And from there on, it became logical to start using NumPy and to some extent pandas
Yeah.
to support machine learning.
Exactly.
And so machine learning more and more standardized on using Python. I can tell you, I almost got tears in my eyes when I saw the announcement for TensorFlow by Google, because and this was by Jeff Dean, who, when I was at Google, was like this big, powerful C++ god.
Wow.
And here he was
Bunch of jazz.
announcing a tool
Yeah.
where the user interface was import TensorFlow and then TensorFlow dot do something.
Mhm.
And I thought, wow, even Jeff Dean sees value in Python now. And so that gave me a little watery eyes. And they weren't the only one. I think they
Yeah.
were the first one that started, well, certainly the first one that I heard of that type of thing. Now everybody seems to be using PyTorch and Onyx.
Yes.
Mhm.
Ah, but that sort of Python rode all those waves of increased popularity on sort of having been there at the right time and having been used and extended by people with vision much more than I. I was just happily sitting there, BDFL, trying to get, yeah, but the BDFL doesn't control the third party packages and doesn't have anything to say about the community. I did try to make the community
Yeah.
as good as it could be, and sort of I often just listened to people. It wasn't my idea originally to focus more on diversity,
Yeah.
but there were
100%.
people sort of that I knew and respected who came to me with very alarming statistics about diversity at open source conferences in general.
Yeah.
And I said, oh my gosh, that's really terrible.
Mm.
You have my full support if you want to do something about that. And they did. I didn't have to do much myself. I made a few sort of token gestures. Like, I remember one year I was doing a keynote about the new Python version or something, or just about Python in general at the big Python conference. And I surprised everyone by saying, when it was time for Q&A, uh, let's get Q&A from women first.
Exactly.
And there were plenty of women in the audience, but they often were drowned out during Q&A because there's so many classic hackers, all guys, would crowd the microphone first. That was just a sort of a gesture,
Yeah.
but it did sort of make people think about diversity in the whole
Mm.
community.
I just want to say that if people, the Python documentary about Guido that I think just came out recently, and the story is there about how Marietta became the first core developer, and I literally was crying watching
Yeah.
that because it's
It's
so
quite emotional.
amazing. And even for myself, the first time I met you, Guido, was at PyCon, and you were wearing a shirt that says Python is for girls. And I took a picture with you, like, when you were wearing that shirt, and it was just I think a lot of the community being the way it is definitely stems from you just being open to
Yeah.
having a welcoming community, you know? So,
Mhm.
yeah, it's really great.
Well, and you have to thank all the women who talked to me, and
Yeah.
well, I listened, sure, but they came to me with sort of ideas for improvement in that area.
But it's such a unique community where genuinely I feel like the word community is used kind of with a loose definition, but with Python, it feels like, no, we are all contributing. No, I'm rather newer to the space, but I have felt like, I can genuinely contribute, can genuinely try to do what others do. And it
Yeah.
stems from just seeing what everyone does, seeing how everyone cares, seeing how people celebrate others, and then watching the documentary and so sense of pride of
Yeah.
being here. And I think it will continue to grow because of that.
Yeah.
Outside of the technical aspect, outside of the advantages that it has, the experiences it has, the people underneath it are just it's just something different here. It's an energy that's different, and it's just
And
hard
you
to
never want
replicate.
to lose that.
Yeah.
I I
100%.
I want to keep that side of the community because that's what makes me come back still.
Yeah,
And yeah,
absolutely.
we appreciate that stance very much. I know we wanted to wrap up with just any advice that you had top of mind that you wanted to share to people new to the field, wanting
Mhm.
to start a career in the space.
Ay, ay, ay. Yeah, it's particularly iffy what to do right now because you
Mm.
hear so many people say conflicting things about the role of AI in computer science for the next 5 or 15 or 50 years. I don't believe that AI is going to kill us all. I mean, there are
No.
doom thinkers where
Yeah.
like I go to a smaller annual conference where there are a lot of like AI super skeptics. They're kicking against anything that reeks about like privacy violations or copyright violations. I mean, and yeah, the big three AI companies and the smaller ones as well have done very debatable things, questionable things about where they collected their materials and if those materials were published with that use in mind and if they were giving the rights to that kind of use to anybody who would scan their website. I think that's unfortunate, and they could have done a much better job there. For me, it's not enough to sort of say I boycott this. Like I will not buy a Tesla because Elon Musk had made such a fool of himself lately. But I will not stop using LLMs because they had shady practices during their training periods. I also don't believe that So I don't believe that it'll kill us all. I also don't believe that'll enter us into a period of bliss where the AIs take over all
Right.
work and we can all just lie on the beach with a cocktail,
Oh, that would be great.
occasionally telling the AI to do something. I also don't see that happening. I mean, in the end, we're humans and we have all kinds of weird motivations. And there are a lot of problems where the solution clearly is not throw more paperwork or code or systems at it, but
Yeah.
do the humane thing. I think AI, despite the current hype and maybe too bad for Microsoft and others, investments of trillions of dollars in data center. I think it's gonna be a great tool for knowledge workers who know what they're doing. If you're a knowledge worker and you don't know what you're doing with it, if
Mm.
you've never written code before and you try your hands at vibe coding some application, it's unlikely to be either a very interesting application as a result or to be very usable. You absolutely cannot trust that it works as intended. LLMs don't seem to be very good at at sort of kicking edge cases. So yeah, what do you do if the file is empty? What do you do if the file doesn't exist? What do you do if these numbers aren't normalized? There are a lot of errors that can happen where if the AI wrote your code, you have no idea if it's doing a sensible thing when an edge case shows up. So the people who benefit most from AI at the moment is the experienced knowledge workers who have chores that they know very well how to do, but that are boring. And instead of delegating that to a cheap worker in the Philippines or an intern, they can let an AI do it. And hopefully we'll have much more interesting positions for the interns.
Well, we appreciate the time you spent with us today. I was just genuinely so shocked when Marlene told me, like, "Oh, we're gonna
Yeah.
talk to Guido." I was like, "You're lying to me. There's no."
I literally said this is the longest shot ever. 'Cause I literally
Whatever.
said,
Oh,
missing out
oh.
games. It's
But
but
I know
thank you.
I can't talk short.
No, this is awesome.
this has
This is
been
awesome.
amazing, Guido. Thank
All
you so much
right.
for joining us.